The great hall stretched before Ambassador Sarah Chen like a cathedral made of light and crystal. Thousands of alien beings filled the massive space, their forms so different from humanity that Sarah had to remind herself this was real. Some looked like walking trees with silver bark. Others floated as balls of pure energy. A few resembled giant insects with too many eyes. Sarah walked down the center path toward the council platform. Her simple black suit looked plain next to the elaborate robes and biological displays around her, but she kept her back straight and her face calm. Behind her, the other human delegates followed in silence. The Galactic Confederation had watched Earth for 50 years. They observed human wars, human art, human science. Now humanity wanted to join their group of star-traveling species, but first, they had to prove they belonged. Human representative. A voice boomed through the hall. It came from a creature that looked like living crystal, tall as a building and glowing with inner light. This was Counselor Vorthak Prime, one of the eldest beings in the galaxy. You stand before the Confederation Council to request membership among the civilized species of this galaxy. Sarah stepped forward. We do, honored Counselor. Humanity seeks to learn from and contribute to the galactic community. A sound like breaking glass filled the air. It was laughter from the crystal beings. Near them, energy creatures pulsed with what seemed like amusement. Sarah felt her jaw tighten, but kept her expression neutral. Another voice spoke, this one sharp and cold. Contribute? The speaker was Counselor Zarthek of the Hegemony faction. His species looked like tall, thin humans, but with gray skin and black eyes that showed no emotion. Your species wages war on itself. You destroy your own planet. You show aggression toward any difference you encounter. What could such primitives contribute to us? Murmurs of agreement rippled through parts of the assembly. Sarah had expected this. The human observers had warned her that many species saw humanity as violent barbarians. We understand your concerns, Sarah replied. But we believe diversity of thought and approach strengthens any community. Humanity has much to learn, but perhaps something to offer as well. Zarthek's black eyes seemed to pierce through her. Something to offer? Your species has existed for mere thousands of years. Some of us have guided civilizations for millions. Your technology is crude. Your diplomacy is simple. Your military tactics are based on brute force. He paused, letting his words sink in. However, the Confederation is not without mercy. We do not simply reject applicants. We test them. The hall fell silent. Even the constant humming and clicking of alien conversations stopped. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Counselor Vorthak Prime spoke again. The trial of ascension. 3 tests to prove your species worthy of joining civilized galactic society. An image appeared in the air above the assembly. It showed a list of species names, all marked with a red symbol. 47 species have attempted these trials. In the past 1,000 years, Vorthak Prime continued. All have failed. Most barely survived the first test. Sarah studied the list. Some names she recognized from human databases, species that had simply vanished from galactic records. Others were completely unknown. The trials test 3 essential qualities, Zarthek explained, his voice carrying a note of satisfaction. First, technological innovation under impossible constraints. Second, diplomatic resolution of an unsolvable conflict. Third, military defense against overwhelming odds. He gestured, and new images appeared. A dying star system, 2 fleets locked in eternal battle, a massive space fortress under attack. Each test has specific parameters. Each has been designed to push a species beyond their limits. Each has proven that membership in the Confederation requires more than desire or good intentions. Sarah looked at the images, her mind already working. The tests seemed designed to have no solution. That was probably the point. You will have standard galactic time limits for each trial, Vorthak Prime said. 30 rotations for the first test, 20 for the second, 10 for the third. You may use only the resources provided. No assistance from any Confederation species will be given. And if we refuse the trials? Sarah asked. The silence that followed was answer enough. Then Zarthek spoke, his voice soft but carrying clearly through the hall. Then humanity will be classified as a pre-civilized species. Your star system will be quarantined. No galactic contact will be permitted. Your species will develop alone if it develops at all. Sarah felt the weight of every human life pressing down on her shoulders. Earth's future hung on her next words.
The assembled aliens waited, many seeming eager to see humanity back down. But Sarah thought of the scientists who had dreamed of the stars, the diplomats who believed in peaceful contact, the soldiers who had trained to defend not just Earth,
but the principles Earth stood for. She thought of children who might never see the galaxy if she said no. We accept the trials, she said clearly. A ripple of surprise went through the assembly. Several alien species exchanged what looked like worried glances. A few of the energy. Beings pulsed brighter. Zarthek leaned forward slightly. You understand the consequences of failure? Your species faces not just rejection, but isolation. Perhaps extinction. We understand, Sarah replied. But we also understand something else. You're not just testing us. You're testing yourselves. The hall erupted in confused sounds. Clicks, hums, energy pulses, and stranger noises filled the air. Zarthek's black eyes narrowed. Explain. Sarah took a step forward. For 1,000 years, no species has passed these trials. That suggests either the tests are impossible or they're designed to fail. If they're impossible, why give them? If they're designed to fail, then you're not really looking for new members. You're looking for excuses to keep the Confederation exclusive. The noise in the hall grew louder. Some aliens sounded angry. Others seemed thoughtful. A few appeared, almost amused. But here's what I think, Sarah continued, raising her voice to be heard. I think these tests can be passed. I think previous species failed because they tried to meet your expectations instead of exceeding them. They tried to prove they were like you instead of proving they were themselves. Zarthek stood up slowly. His tall form cast a shadow across the platform. Bold words from a primitive species. Maybe, Sarah agreed, but bold words from a species that has never learned to accept impossible as an answer. Counselor Vorthak Prime's crystal form pulsed with light. When he spoke, his voice carried something that might have been interest. The trials will begin. In 7 rotations, you will be transported to the first test site with a team of your choosing. The parameters will be explained upon arrival. Sarah bowed slightly. We'll be ready. As the assembly began to dissolve into smaller groups, Sarah caught fragments of alien conversations. Many sounded skeptical. Some seemed worried. A few carried what might have been hope. Walking back down the center path, Sarah felt the weight of eyes upon her. Thousands of alien beings watching the humans leave. Some probably betting on how quickly humanity would fail. But as she reached the exit, she heard something unexpected. A low sound that might have been applause from one section of the assembly. She turned to look and saw a group of beings she didn't recognize. They looked almost plant-like, with green skin and leaf-shaped appendages. One of them stepped forward and spoke in careful, slow words. Good luck, humans. Some of us remember when we were tested too. Sarah smiled and nodded. Her thanks. Then she led her team out of the hall and toward humanity's greatest challenge. Behind them, the Confederation Council continued their debates. But for the first time in 1,000 years, those debates included a new question. What if the humans actually succeeded? The transport ship dropped the human team at the edge of a dying star system. Dr. James Park pressed his face against the viewport and watched 3 worlds spinning slowly around a red giant star that pulsed like a diseased heart. Kepler 438 System, announced the Confederation observer, a floating metal sphere that spoke in flat, emotionless tones. Star entering final collapse phase. 3 inhabited worlds. Combined population, 4,600,000,000 beings. Time until stellar death, 31 standard rotations. Sarah Chen stood beside Park, studying the display screens that showed the system's details. What resources do we have? One asteroid mining platform, basic fabrication equipment, raw materials from local asteroid belt only, no external assistance, permitted. The sphere paused. Previous attempts by qualified species have focused on stellar stabilization or planetary evacuation using advanced technology. All have failed. Park nodded slowly. He was a small man with thick glasses and hands that never stopped moving. Right now, those hands were drawing diagrams in the air as he thought. How many previous attempts? Asked Maria Santos, the team's chief engineer. She was young, but had designed some of Earth's most innovative space habitats. 17, the sphere replied. Most recent was the Kethmari Dominion, technological level 7 on Confederation scale. They attempted to construct stellar containment field. Result, acceleration of collapse timeline. What about moving the planets? Asked Chen. Attempted by Velnari Commonwealth, technological level 9. They tried to relocate planets to stable system. Result, gravitational disruption. Loss of 2 planets during transport. Park stopped drawing in the air and turned to his team. There were 12 humans total, specialists in different fields. All of them looked at the massive scope of the problem and saw the same thing. An impossible task designed to fail. Okay, Park said quietly. They want us to save 4.5 billion people in 30 days using mining equipment and space rocks. Previous species tried to think big, Santos pointed out. Stop a star from dying, move entire planets. What if we think different? Lieutenant Commander Torres, their military advisor, floated over from where he'd been studying tactical displays. The observer said evacuation attempts failed, but failed how? The sphere rotated slightly. Scale limitations. No species has possessed sufficient transport capacity for full population evacuation. Partial evacuations have been attempted. Results: social collapse, civil wars, mission abandonment. Chen smiled slightly. It wasn't a happy smile. So we can't stop the star. We can't move the planets. We can't evacuate everyone. What exactly are we supposed to do? We're supposed to fail, Park said simply. But maybe that's because everyone else was trying to solve the wrong problem. Over the next 2 days, the human team split into groups. Park took the physicists to study the star itself. Santos led the engineers to examine the mining platform. Torres and the social scientists focused on the populated worlds below. What they found painted a grim picture. The star was beyond any hope of stabilization. The planets were too massive to move with available technology. The populations were too large for any reasonable evacuation. But Park's team made an interesting discovery. The star's collapse was following a predictable pattern. They had 18 days of relative stability, then 12 days of increasing instability before final death. Santos found something else. The mining platform was more versatile than it appeared. Its fabrication systems could be modified. Its raw material processors could handle complex tasks. And the asteroid belt contained more than just common metals. Torres discovered the most important thing of all. The 3 worlds weren't equally populated. The first planet held 2 billion people in underwater cities. The second had 1 billion beings living in mountain communities. The third housed 1.5 billion in floating cloud cities. On day 5, Park called the team together. We're not going to save the star, he announced. We're not going to move the planets. We're not going to evacuate 4 billion people. Several team members looked confused. The Confederation observer hummed quietly, probably recording everything, for later analysis. We're going to do something else, Park continued. We're going to move the people in small groups over time, using the planets themselves as temporary safe zones. He activated a holographic display that showed his plan. The underwater cities can be converted into transport pods. We help them build life support systems that can survive in space for short periods. Then we use the mining platform to create relay stations throughout the system. Santos picked up the explanation. The mountain communities can be relocated. 2 orbital habitats will build using asteroid materials. Their technology is good enough to help with construction. And the cloud cities? Asked Torres. They're already floating. Park grinned. We modify their lift systems for space travel, turn them into generation ships that can travel to nearby systems. The observer sphere spun faster. This plan requires technological innovations beyond your current capabilities. Transport systems of this scale have never been constructed by pre-Confederation species. That's because pre-Confederation species tried to build them the way Confederation species would, Santos replied. We're going to build them the way humans would. The next 10 days were chaos. The human team split into dozens of smaller groups, each working on different parts of the plan. They didn't follow normal procedure. They didn't wait for approval from higher authorities, they just started building. The mining platform became a hive of activity. Santos and her engineers modified its systems to produce thousands of different components simultaneously. They didn't use advanced alien designs. They used human engineering principles. Make it simple, make it strong, make it work. Park's physics team worked with the underwater people to design transport pods that could carry entire city blocks through space. The pods used primitive but reliable chemical rockets and basic life support. Nothing fancy, nothing that could break easily. Torres coordinated with the mountain dwellers to build orbital habitats using their traditional construction techniques adapted for space. The habitats looked crude compared to Confederation designs, but they were built to last and could be expanded easily. The most ambitious part involved the cloud cities. Santos's team helped them convert their atmospheric processors into interstellar drives. The cities would become slow but steady generation ships, carrying their populations to distant systems over many years. By day 20, the first phase was complete. The underwater transport pods began carrying people to the newly built orbital habitats. The mountain dwellers started moving to their space-based communities. The cloud cities prepared for their long journey to the stars. The Confederation observer had stopped making comments. It just watched and recorded as humans and aliens worked together in ways that violated every standard procedure. On day 25, the star began its final collapse phase. But by then, half the population was already in space or in protected habitats. The transport pods moved in steady streams between planets and stations. The orbital habitats expanded daily as more people arrived. 3 cloud cities had already begun their slow journey to nearby star systems. This is highly irregular, the observer finally said on day 28. Your methods do not follow established protocols. Your technology is primitive. Your safety margins are inadequate by Confederation standards. Park looked up from where he was helping seal the last transport pod. Are people dying? No, the observer admitted. Are the habitats stable? Yes. Are the cloud cities on course for safe systems? Yes. Then our methods work. On day 30, the star collapsed. The 3 planets were consumed by the expanding shell of stellar death. But their populations were safe. Some in orbital habitats that would become permanent space colonies. Some in transport pods traveling to prepared sites in other systems. Some in cloud cities that would carry their cultures across the galaxy for generations. The human team stood on the mining platform and watched the star die. Around them, millions of alien beings continued their new lives in human-designed habitats. The test parameters have been met, the observer announced. Population survival 97.4%, infrastructure preservation adequate, method evaluation irregular but effective. Santos wiped sweat from her forehead and grinned. Irregular but effective, I like that. Park nodded thoughtfully. The other species failed because they tried to solve an impossible problem. We succeeded because we changed the problem to something possible. Is that what humans do? Asked one of the rescued aliens, a being that looked like a walking tree. Change impossible problems into possible ones? Pretty much, Chen replied. We're not smart enough to accept that something can't be done. As their transport ship arrived to take them to the second trial, the human team looked back at the thriving communities they'd helped create. In the distance, the cloud cities moved steadily toward their new homes among the stars. The observer, Sphere hummed quietly. Preparing report for Confederation Council. Recommendation, proceed with second trial. Note, Human methodology requires further study. Chen smiled as they boarded the transport. 1 test down, 2 to go. But for the first time since arriving in this system, she felt confident. Not because the next tests would be easy, but because humans had just proven something important. When the uni-captain Elena Rodriguez stepped off the transport shuttle and immediately felt the tension in the air. The space station orbiting the disputed nebula hummed with barely controlled anger. 2 very different groups of aliens occupied opposite sides of the docking bay, carefully avoiding each other. On the left stood the Kythera, insect-like beings with 4 arms and compound eyes that glittered like jewels. Their chitinous armor was decorated with intricate patterns that seemed to shift in the light. On the right were the Melthari, aquatic creatures in mechanical suits that allowed them to survive in air. Water circulated visibly through tubes in their armor, and their large dark eyes watched everything with ancient patience. "Welcome to Nexus Station," said the Confederation mediator, a tall being with blue skin and too many fingers. "I am Arbitrator Kunvel. This conflict has persisted for 1,043 years. 15 previous mediation attempts have failed." Rodriguez nodded politely. She was a small woman with graying hair and eyes that missed nothing. Behind her, her diplomatic team spread out to observe both alien groups. "What's the official reason for the conflict?" asked Dr. Helen Chang, the team's cultural specialist. "Resource dispute," Kunvel replied. "The Helix Nebula contains rare, quantum crystals essential for advanced technology. Both species claim exclusive rights to the region." Rodriguez watched the aliens carefully. The Kythera moved in quick, precise motions. Their antennae twitched constantly, and they made soft, clicking sounds when they communicated. The Melthari were slower, more deliberate. When they spoke, it sounded like singing underwater. "Has anyone tried sharing the resources?" asked Lieutenant Williams, the team's military advisor. Kunvel's expression was hard to read, but he seemed amused. "Of course. Multiple partition plans have been proposed. The Kythera reject any Melthari presence in what they call their sacred hunting grounds. The Melthari refuse to allow Kythera access to what they term their ancestral singing waters." "Sacred hunting grounds? Ancestral singing waters?" Rodriguez repeated thoughtfully. "That doesn't sound like a resource dispute." "The underlying motivations are irrelevant," Kunvel said firmly. "Both species desire the crystals. Neither will share. Your task is to find a solution that satisfies both parties within 20 standard rotations." Rodriguez looked at her team. They had worked together for years, handling Earth's most difficult diplomatic situations. But this was their first alien conflict. "We'd like to speak with representatives from both species," Rodriguez said. "Separately at first, then together." "Previous mediators have attempted this approach," Kunvel warned. "Both species tend to become agitated when discussing the matter." The first meeting was with the Kythera. Their leader was called Prime Hunter Siktar, and his armor bore more decorative patterns than the others. When he spoke, his voice was high and sharp like metal scraping metal. "Humans," he clicked. "We know of your species. Young hunters with soft skin and small weapons. Why do the Confederation elders send children to resolve hunter matters?" Rodriguez kept her voice calm and respectful. "We're here to learn and hopefully help. Can you tell us about your connection to the nebula?" Ziktar's compound eyes focused on her with sudden intensity. "Connection? The Helix is where the first hunt began, where our ancestors proved themselves worthy of the stars. Every Kythera must complete their blood trial in those sacred spaces." Dr. Chang leaned forward slightly. "What does the blood trial involve?" "Young hunters enter the nebula alone. They must navigate the crystal fields using only instinct and courage. They face the singing death that lives in the deep spaces. If they return, they are adults. If they do not..." Siktar's antenna drooped slightly. They joined the ancestors in the eternal hunt. The humans exchanged glances. This was definitely not just about mining rights. The meeting with the Melthari was very different. Their leader was called Deep Singer Velmara, and her suit was more elaborate than the others with flowing decorations that moved like water weeds. "Young swimmers from the small blue world," she sang in her liquid voice. "You move through space like fish learning to swim. But perhaps fish wisdom can find what older swimmers have missed." "We hope so," Rodriguez replied. "Can you explain your people's connection to the nebula?" Velmara's large eyes seemed to grow distant. "The helix is where the great song was first sung, where our ancestors learned to hear the music of the deep void. The crystal formations there resonate with frequencies that carry the voices of all who came before us." Lieutenant Williams looked confused. "You mean the crystals make sounds?" "They sing," Velmara corrected gently. "They hold the memories of every Melthari who has passed into the deep currents. When our young ones are ready to learn the adult songs, they must go to the helix. They must listen to the ancestor voices and add their own song to the eternal chorus." After the meetings, Rodriguez's team gathered in their assigned quarters. "So, it's not about crystals at all," Dr. Chang said. "It's about religion, sacred sites, coming-of-age rituals. Both species use the nebula for the same purpose," Williams added, "testing their young people. But they can't share because they each think the other species contaminates the space." Rodriguez stared out the viewport at the distant nebula. It was beautiful, swirling clouds of gas and dust lit by the glow of embedded crystals. She could understand why both species considered it sacred. "The previous mediators failed because they treated this like a resource conflict," she said slowly. "They tried to divide up mining rights instead of addressing the real issue." "But how do you share a sacred site?" asked Dr. Chang. "Especially when both species believe the other's presence makes it unholy." Rodriguez was quiet for a long time. Then she smiled slightly. "Maybe you don't share it. Maybe you take turns." The next day, Rodriguez called both leaders together. Shiktar and Velmara sat on opposite sides of the conference room, their body language radiating mutual hostility. "We've studied your histories," Rodriguez began. "Both of your species have been using the Helix Nebula for sacred purposes for over 1,000 years. Both have valid spiritual claims to the region. The insects defile the hunting grounds with their violence," Velmara sang angrily. "The water dwellers pollute the sacred spaces with their weak songs." Siktar clicked back. "Stop," Rodriguez said firmly. "You're both right. Your presence does interfere with each other's rituals. But you're also both wrong about why." Both aliens turned to stare at her. "Siktar, your people hunt in the nebula to prove their courage and skill. But hunting is easier when prey is abundant, correct?" The Kathira leader nodded slowly. "Velmara, your people sing in the nebula to hear the voices of your ancestors. But singing is clearer when there are no other sounds to interfere, correct?" The Melthari leader's eyes widened slightly. Rodriguez activated a holographic display showing the nebula's structure. "The helix follows a seasonal pattern. For 6 months of your year, the crystal formations are aligned for optimal acoustic resonance. For the other 6 months, the gravitational fields create the dangerous conditions your hunters need for proper trials." She highlighted different sections of the nebula as she spoke. "During resonance season, the hunting conditions are poor. Prey animals hide in stable zones, but the singing conditions are perfect. During storm season, the acoustic properties are disrupted by gravitational chaos, but the hunting is at its most challenging." Both aliens studied the display intently. "You're suggesting temporal division," Siktar said slowly. "I'm suggesting you already have temporal division," Rodriguez replied. "You've just been fighting over it instead of using it." She brought up more data. "Kithara blood trials have traditionally occurred during storm season, when the challenges are greatest. Melthari singing rituals have historically happened during resonance season when the ancestor voices are clearest. But the other species would still contaminate the sacred spaces," Velmara protested. "Would they?" Dr. Chang asked. "Or would they consecrate them in a different way?" Rodriguez nodded. "What if Kythera hunters and Melthari singers both contribute to the nebula's sacred nature? What if the courage of young hunters adds power to the ancestor songs? What if the wisdom of the singers guides young hunters to greater bravery?" The room fell silent. Both alien leaders seemed to be thinking hard. You propose that we cooperate in sacred matters? Siktar asked carefully. I propose that you recognize what you already are, Rodriguez said. Two peoples who both understand that the young must be tested, that ancestors must be honored, and that some places in the universe are too important to be owned by anyone. Over the next several days, the negotiations continued. There were setbacks. Old hatreds flared up. Ancient grievances were rehashed. But slowly, carefully, a new framework emerged. The Kythera would have exclusive access to the nebula during storm season for their blood trials. The Melthari would have exclusive access during resonance season for their singing rituals. But, more importantly, both species would work together to maintain the nebula's sacred nature. Kythera hunters would protect the crystal for. The Confederation fleet fled at top speed. Behind them, the research station's energy readings climbed to impossible levels. Boarding teams still on the station, Radmiral Marcus Webb stood on the bridge of the HSS Defiance and stared at the tactical display that showed his impossible situation. The research station, Kepler 442, hung in space behind them, a massive complex of laboratories and living quarters that housed 12,000 scientists from various Confederation species. His ship was a single frigate, outdated by galactic standards and crewed by 200 human volunteers. In 10 hours, they would face the Confederation's most elite battle fleet commanded by War Marshal Kethvar himself. Admiral, called his tactical officer Lieutenant Commander Sarah Kim. Enemy fleet composition confirmed. 12 heavy cruisers, 36 destroyers, 72 fighter squadrons. Estimated total crew, 40,000. Webb nodded calmly. He was a tall man with gray hair and steady hands that had seen too many battles, but none quite like this one. Any word on fleet doctrine? He asked. Standard Confederation tactics, replied his intelligence officer, Commander David Park. Coordinated assault, overwhelming firepower, minimal casualties through superior force projection. Of course, Webb muttered. They fight like they have all the time and resources in the galaxy. His communications officer, Lieutenant Torres, looked up from her station. Admiral, the Confederation observer is requesting to speak with you. Put him through. The observer was the same floating metal sphere that had monitored their previous trials. Its voice carried no emotion as it delivered the mission parameters. Defense objective: prevent capture or destruction of research station Kepler 442 for minimum duration of 72 hours. Failure conditions: station destroyed, station captured, defending force eliminated. Victory conditions: station intact and operational after time limit expires. Webb studied the tactical display again. The station was huge, but not heavily armed. A few defensive turrets, basic shields, enough to stop pirates but useless against a fleet. Any restrictions on our methods? Webb asked. None. All tactics are permitted within the bounds of the simulation. Station evacuation is not allowed. Station must remain operational with full crew aboard. And War Marshal Kethvar's orders? Complete capture of the station with minimal damage to facilities and crew. The War Marshal views this as a training exercise to demonstrate Confederation tactical superiority. After the observer disconnected, Webb called his senior staff together in the ship's small briefing room. Thoughts? He asked. Commander Park spread tactical charts across the table. Conventional defense is suicide. We can't match their firepower. We can't outrun them. We can't hide the station. Lieutenant Commander Kim nodded agreement. Even if we use every trick in the book, we might delay them for 6 hours, maybe 8 if we're lucky. So we don't fight conventionally, Webb said quietly. What assets do we actually have? His engineering officer, Chief Martinez, pulled up technical specifications. The station has massive industrial fabricators, research labs with exotic materials, power generators that could run a small city, and... He paused, highlighting something on his display. And what, Chief? The station's main structure is modular. Sections can be detached and moved independently. It was designed that way for research flexibility. Webb leaned forward. How big are these sections? Largest ones mass about 50,000 tons each. Smallest are maybe 5,000 tons. Kim looked confused. Admiral, you're not thinking of using station sections as weapons? That violates every rule of civilized warfare. No, Webb said slowly, but it might not violate the rules of this simulation. He turned to his science officer, Dr. Rachel Stone. Doctor, what's the most dangerous thing on that station? Stone consulted her data pad. Antimatter containment, lab, quantum field generators, experimental energy weapons. Oh, and there's a black hole physics laboratory with a contained microsingularity. Perfect. Webb stood up and activated the ship's communication system. All stations, this is the Admiral. I want every department head to think about this question. If you had to turn a research station into a weapon, how would you do it? Over the next 4 hours, reports flooded in. The answers were creative, terrifying, and completely outside standard military thinking. The physics team suggested turning the quantum field generators into space-time distortion weapons. The engineering crew proposed using the industrial fabricators to create massive kinetic projectiles. The medical staff recommended biological agents, which Webb immediately rejected, but it was Dr. Stone who provided the key insight. Admiral, she said during the final briefing, we're thinking about this wrong. We're trying to turn the station into a weapon. But what if we turn the weapon into a station? Explain. The enemy expects to capture an intact research facility. They'll use capture tactics, not destruction tactics. But what if the thing they're trying to capture is actually a massive booby trap? Webb smiled for the first time since arriving. Go on. We evacuate the station's crew to our ship. We set up the research labs to look normal but configure them as weapons. When the enemy boards, instead of finding scientists, they find surprises, and then? Dr. Stone's smile was not entirely friendly. Then we detonate the entire station while they're inside it. The plan that emerged was audacious even by human standards. The station's crew would be secretly evacuated to the Defiance using maintenance shuttles. The research labs would be rigged as elaborate traps. Most importantly, the station's power core would be modified to create the largest explosion possible, without actually destroying the nearby star system. When War Marshal Kethavar's fleet arrived, they found exactly what they expected: a human frigate trying desperately to defend a research station. The Defiance engaged the enemy fleet using conventional tactics. They targeted the lighter ships, tried to use the station's mass as cover, and generally fought like an outmatched defender should fight. For 2 hours, the battle proceeded normally. The human ship took heavy damage but continued fighting. The Confederation fleet closed in systematically, following doctrine designed to minimize casualties while ensuring victory. Then something unexpected happened. The Defiance's engines went critical. Emergency evacuation, Webb broadcast on all frequencies. All hands abandon ship. Repeat, abandon ship. Escape pods launched from the frigate as it tumbled out of control toward the research station. The pods scattered in all directions, some picked up by Confederation ships, others drifting toward nearby asteroids. War Marshal Kethavar, commanding from his flagship, watched the frigate crash into the station's outer ring. The explosion was spectacular but not catastrophic. The station's main structure survived intact. Boarding teams, commence capture operations, Kethavar ordered. Secure all research data and ensure crew safety. Confederation Marines swarmed onto the station through multiple entry points. They moved efficiently through the corridors, following standard protocols for facility capture. The research labs were full of exotic equipment and valuable data. Scientists cowered in their quarters, offering no resistance. It took 30 minutes for the first boarding team to reach the station's main computer core. Another 20 minutes to establish full control. Kethavar's flag captain reported success across all operational areas. Station secure, War Marshal. All research personnel accounted for. Facilities intact. Mission accomplished. Kethavar allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The humans had fought bravely, but predictably. Another species had failed the trials. The Confederation's superiority was once again proven. That's when Admiral Webb's voice came over the station's communication system. War Marshal Kethavar, this is Admiral Webb. I hope you're enjoying your tour of our research station. Kethvar's satisfaction turned to confusion. Impossible. Your ship was destroyed. Your crew captured. My ship was destroyed, yes. But my crew? My crew is safely aboard our escape pods, which are now at minimum safe distance. As for the station crew, well, check your prisoner count again. Frantic reports came in from boarding teams throughout the station. The scientists they had captured were actually mannequins and holograms. The research equipment was real, but most of it had been repurposed. The quantum field generators were charging to critical levels. The antimatter containment was deliberately failing. You're bluffing, Kethvar said, but his voice carried doubt. Admiral Webb to all Confederation vessels. Webb continued calmly. You have approximately 3 minutes to clear the blast radius. The station has been converted into a quantum antimatter bomb, with a yield sufficient to destroy everything within 50,000 kilometers. Panic spread through the Confederation fleet. Some captains tried to beam their boarding teams off the station. Others began emergency acceleration away from the facility. A few demanded orders from their war marshal. Kethvar stared at his tactical display. If the human was telling the truth, thousands of his people were about to die. If the human was bluffing, retreat would mean admitting defeat to an inferior enemy. 2 minutes, Webb announced helpfully. The decision was taken out of Kethvar's hands when every sensor on his flagship detected massive energy buildup from the station's core. This was no bluff. The humans had actually turned a research facility into a gigantic bomb. All ships emergency withdrawal, Ket. The Great Hall of the Confederation Council looked different when Ambassador Sarah Chen entered for the second time. The same thousands of alien beings filled the massive space, but their attitudes had changed. Some watched the humans with curiosity, instead of dismissal. Others seemed nervous. A few appeared openly hostile. Sarah walked down the center path again, but this time she was not alone. Behind her came the heroes of the 3 trials, Dr. James Park and Maria Santos from the Stellar Rescue, Captain Elena Rodriguez from the Diplomatic Mission, and Admiral Marcus Webb from the Station Defense. Their simple human clothing contrasted sharply with the elaborate displays around them, but they carried themselves with quiet confidence. Counselor Vorthak Prime's crystal form pulsed with complex patterns of light as Sarah approached the platform. Human representatives, his voice resonated through the hall, you return to face the judgment of the Confederation Council. We do, honored counselor, Sarah replied. Humanity has completed the 3 trials as requested. A sound like grinding metal came from Counselor Zarthek's section of the assembly. Completed? Your methods violated every principle of civilized conduct. You ignored established protocols. You used primitive techniques where advanced technology was expected. You succeeded through chaos rather than order. Murmurs of agreement came from parts of the assembly, but Sarah noticed that other sections remained silent. The energy beings pulsed in patterns she couldn't read. Some of the more exotic species made sounds that might have been thoughtful. Elder Counselor Velnara of the Transcended, Vorthak Prime announced. The floor recognizes your wisdom. A section of the hall that had seemed empty suddenly filled with presence. The Transcended were so advanced that they barely interacted with physical reality anymore. When Velnara spoke, her voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Young swimmers in the vast ocean of existence, her voice was like distant music. You have shown us something we had forgotten. The galaxy is large enough for many ways of thinking. Zarthek's black eyes narrowed. The Transcended speak of philosophy while ignoring practical reality. These humans succeeded through luck and recklessness. Their methods cannot be replicated. Their approaches cannot be taught. They offer chaos where we need order. Do they? Asked a new voice. The assembly turned to see representatives from the species humanity had helped during the trials. The underwater people from the first test, the Kithara and Melthari from the second, and War Marshal Kethvar himself from the third. Prime Hunter Ziktar stepped forward, his insect-like form clicking with formal precision. Honored Council, the humans did not bring chaos to our conflict with the Melthari. They brought clarity. They helped us see that our war was built on misunderstanding. Deep singer Velmara's aquatic suit gleamed as she added her voice. The young swimmers showed us that sharing sacred space does not diminish its holiness. Our peoples now guard the Helix Nebula together, and both our rituals have grown stronger. War Marshal Kethvar, his tall form imposing even among aliens, spoke, with military precision. The humans defeated my fleet not through superior firepower but through superior thinking. They won by changing the rules of engagement. In a real war, such flexibility could save countless lives. One of the tree-like beings from the stellar rescue mission rustled forward. Our species lives because humans refuse to accept that our situation was hopeless. They found solutions we never imagined because they thought in ways we never considered. Zarthek's voice cut through the testimonials like a blade. Anomalies, exceptions. The humans succeeded against specific challenges, but proved nothing about their general fitness for Confederation membership. Their violent nature remains unchanged. Their primitive technology is unchanged. Their chaotic society is unchanged. He gestured dramatically toward the assembly. For 47 trials, species have failed because they lacked the fundamental qualities necessary for civilized galactic society. The humans succeeded through accident and luck. They do not represent progress. They represent danger. The hall erupted in confused sounds as different species debated among themselves. Sarah listened to the arguments swirling around her, then stepped forward. Counselor Zarthek is correct about one thing, she said clearly. We haven't changed. We're still the same species that applied for membership. Still violent, still primitive, still chaotic by your standards. Zarthek smiled coldly. Thank you for that honest admission. But here's what Counselor Zarthek doesn't understand, Sarah continued. Those aren't flaws to be fixed. They're features to be managed. She turned to address the entire assembly. Humans are violent, yes, but we're violent in defense of things we care about. We fought to save 4 billion lives we'd never met. We risked our ship to protect a research station full of alien scientists. We went to war against despair itself, because we decided despair was the enemy. Dr. Park stepped up beside her. We're primitive, yes, but primitiveness means we haven't learned that some things are impossible. We solved problems you couldn't solve because we didn't know they couldn't be solved. Captain Rodriguez joined them. We're chaotic, yes, but chaos means we don't think in straight lines. When ordered approaches fail, we try something new. When official procedures don't work, we invent unofficial ones. Admiral Webb completed the group. What counselor? Zarthek calls flaws we call tools. What he calls dangers we call opportunities. What he calls proof of our unworthiness we call proof that the galaxy needs more than one way of doing things. Zarthek's composure cracked slightly. You dare suggest that the Confederation's methods are insufficient? Our civilization spans millions of years. Our technology transcends your understanding. Our wisdom has guided countless species to enlightenment. And yet, Sarah said quietly, for 1,000 years, no new species has joined your enlightened civilization. For 1,000 years, every applicant has failed your tests. Either your tests are impossible, or they're designed to exclude rather than include. The hall fell silent. Even the constant background hum of alien conversations stopped. We think, it's the second option, Sarah continued. We think you've become so afraid of change that you've made membership impossible, not because applicants lack worth, but because accepting them would mean accepting that there are other ways to be civilized. Counselor Vorthak Prime's crystal form pulsed rapidly. You accuse the Confederation of stagnation. We accuse the Confederation of success, Dr. Park replied. You've created such a perfect system that you've forgotten how to grow. You've become so good at being yourselves that you can't imagine being anything else. Zarthek stood abruptly. This is intolerable. The humans mock our traditions, question our wisdom, and demand membership despite proving their unworthiness. I call for immediate rejection and permanent quarantine. Several sections of the assembly voiced agreement, but several others remained notably silent, and a few began making sounds that might have been objections. That's when Elder Counselor Felnara spoke again, her voice carrying absolute authority. Counselor Zarthek, she said softly, you speak of unworthiness. But tell me, what made us worthy when we first joined this council eons ago? Zarthek hesitated. The transcended were already beyond such concerns when the Confederation was formed. Were we? Velnara's presence seemed to intensify. Or did we earn our place by bringing something new to the galaxy? Something that no other species could offer? The silence stretched for long moments before she continued. Every species in this council was once primitive by the standards of their time. Everyone was once violent, chaotic, unworthy. But each brought unique gifts that made the Confederation stronger. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice carried sadness. Until we became so strong that we forgot why strength matters. So wise that we forgot the value of fresh perspectives. So perfect that we stopped growing. Zarthek's faction began voicing protests, but they were drowned out by a new sound. Representatives from species that humanity had helped were standing up throughout the assembly. The aquatic people, the insect-like Kithra, the tree beings from the Stellar Rescue, even some of Kethvar's military officers. The humans brought us new solutions, one called out. They showed us new ways of thinking, sang another. They proved that impossible is just another word for untried, clicked a third. More voices joined in. Species that had been silent before began speaking up. Not all supported humanity, but enough did to shift the balance of the assembly. Zarthek looked around wildly, then played his final card. Even if we accept their unconventional success, the humans represent a threat to galactic stability. Their unpredictable methods could destabilize our carefully balanced civilization. Could they? Asked Velnara gently. Or could they help us remember how to adapt when balance isn't enough? She addressed the entire assembly now. The universe is changing, as it always has. New challenges arise that require new solutions. Old wisdom must be combined with fresh thinking. The choice before us is simple: do we grow or do we stagnate?